Happy Wednesday, scholars. Excited to spend some time with you guys. Even though we're not physically together, we can still do learning together. So today we're going to look at some well-ordered language, working with possessive nouns. This first lesson will be a bit of a review, hopefully for everyone. Let's jump in. So we're going to look how possessive nouns work in sentences. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. I'm going to put myself right over here so that we can still see our work. So if I look at my first sentence, it says Robin Hood's friend shot longbow arrows. So first thing I want to do whenever I analyze or diagram a sentence is to figure out who is my sentence about. So in this sentence, my friend, or friend in the sentence, is going to be my subject. That is who the sentence is about. Then I look for what did our subject do. So what's the action? Our friend shot. That is going to be our verb in our sentence. Now we figure out from here, is it a linking verb, helping verb, or predicate verb? So if it's a linking verb, usually I am going to be renaming my subject, or I am describing my subject. So in my sentence here, I am not renaming or describing my subject, so it's going to be a predicate verb. Now, since I have a predicate verb, what did my, in the sentence, friend shot? They shot arrows. So that is going to be my direct object. Then I go through and add any of my modifiers. So if I'm longbow, is going to be describing my arrows. Now here's where we have our possessive noun. This is where it might trick you up. That is a name, yes, but because it's possessive, it is acting as an adjective. It is telling me whose friend it is. So Robin Hood's friend, it's describing the friend. So that is going to act as an adjective. Now, for diagramming this sentence, I figure out my base. My subject is friend. The friend shot. And because I have a direct object, I'm going to have a line up and down. Arrows. Now I can add my modifiers. Friend is being described. Whose friend? Robin Hood's friend. And arrows is being described by longbow. Okay. All right, let's look at another one. Is that shaft Robin Hood's arrow? So this one's going to be an interrogative sentence. I can look at it. What is my sentence about? My sentence is, my subject of my sentence is going to be shaft. Now figure out my verb. Now there's no obvious verbs, but usually in an interrogative sentence, it's going to be up at the front. So this is going to be my verb is. Now I need to figure out if it's helping or linking. Usually it's a helping verb if you also have a predicate verb in there. So there's no predicate verb, so this is going to be a linking verb. So shaft is what? So shaft is an arrow. So I am not describing, I'm renaming my subject, which means it is a predicate noun. If it was describing, that means it would be a predicate adjective. Now, I remember possessive nouns act as modifiers in a sentence. So I look at Robin Hood's, that is describing my arrow. It's telling me whose arrow is it? It is Robin Hood's. So it's going to be an adjective. And which shaft is it? It is that shaft. So when diagramming a sentence, I put my subject, shaft, I do my verb, is, I'm going to capitalize that because it was the beginning of my sentence. Now, I don't have any direct objects in my sentence, so I'm going to have a slanted line and arrow. Now, because this is an interrogative sentence, I want my diagram to match that, so I'm going to make sure to put my question mark. Now I can go in and add my modifiers. Let me scooch up just a little bit. So shaft, which shaft? It is that shaft. And then whose arrows? Robin Hood's. Okay, let's look at our next sentence. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. That arrow is Robin Hood's. So our subject, it could either be about Robin Hood or arrow. In this case, it's arrow. We're talking about the arrow in the sentence. So that is going to be my subject. My verb, the only option is going to be is, and it's going to be a linking verb. It's connecting two things together. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Robin Hood, it's a possessive noun, and normally we would think it would be a predicate nominative. But I'm not renaming the arrow, I'm telling whose it is. I'm using it as a modifier describing. So that means Robin Hood is actually going to be a predicate adjective. Robin Hood's, tell me whose arrow, predicate adjective. That leaves one word. Which arrow? That arrow. So that's going to be an adjective describing my subject. Now to diagram this one. Draw my line. My sentence is about arrow, is, and I am describing the arrow. So I'm going to have a slanted line because I don't have a direct object. Robin Hood's. And the only modifier I really have to add is that. I'm going to capitalize it because it was the beginning of my sentence. Alright, let's take a look at another one. Little John borrowed Robin Hood's friend's arrow. Okay, in this sentence, I can see right away that I have two possessive nouns. Robin Hood's and friends. This is where it's going to get a little tricky, but mostly for diagramming. We can follow our same steps that we have been following. So let's first figure out who's my sentence about. Little John is my subject. Little John did what? He borrowed. So that is my verb. Now, in my sentence, he's acting directly on something. He borrowed an arrow. So that means that's going to be my predicate verb, and arrow is going to be a direct object. Now here's where, in analyzing it's not tricky, but when we go to diagram it'll be a little tricky. Whose arrow is it? It's not Robin Hood's arrow, it's the friend's arrow. So that's going to be an adjective. It's telling me whose arrow. Now whose friend is it? It's Robin Hood's friend. So Robin Hood is describing friends, while friends is describing arrow. Alright, we've analyzed it. Now let's diagram this sentence. Start where I always do. My subject is Little John. What did he do? He borrowed. What did he borrow? Arrow. An arrow. Okay. Now it's here it's going to look a little bit different than what we've seen before. Is first, I need to tell me what modified arrow, and that's going to be friends. Now here's something we haven't really seen before, is I need to modify friends now. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to add a little kind of ladder attachment and then bring it down, and this is where I can add Robin Hoods. You guys can't see that. Let me scroll up. There we go. So this is what it would look like diagram. The reason I go off to the left is so that I can show sentence order, because I had Robin Hood first. It's Robin Hood's friends arrow, and my diagram models that. Alright, let's look at one last one before we jump into our workbook pages. Likewise, Little John used the old man's arrow. Do the same thing I always do. Start with who is my sentence about? In this case, it is going to be Little John. He is my subject. And what did Little John do? He used. So that's going to be my verb. Now I'm not linking anything together in my sentence. I'm not renaming John. I'm not describing Little John. So that means it's going to be a predicate verb. And Little John used an arrow. So arrow is again going to be my direct object. Now here's where all my modifiers come about. Let's start at the start of my sentence. Likewise. Likewise is describing how he used it. So that is going to be an adverb because it's describing a verb. The old man. The old man's arrow. The is describing which arrow. So it's going to be an adjective because arrow is a noun. Whose arrow is it? It's the man's arrow. Now old is describing man, just like Robin Hood's in our previous sentence described a possessive noun. A regular adjective can also describe a possessive noun, and it would work the same way. because possessive nouns are acting as adjectives in our sentence. So likewise, Little John used the old man's arrow. All right, we have this analyzed now. I'm going to scroll a little bit, and let's diagram this together. So first start, Little John is my subject. He used an arrow. I have this straight up and down line between used and arrow because arrow is a direct object. So when I have a direct object, I need to have a straight up and down instead of a slanted line. So now I go in and add my modifiers. So used was modified by likewise. I'm going to capitalize that because it's the start of my sentence. Arrow was modified by the. I'm going to go in my sentence order. Now here's where it gets a little tricky, is I need to modify arrow with man's. Then I go back and modify man's with old. Alright, so those are a couple of examples. Let's take a look at our workbook pages that you guys are going to do. So in here, we did the first two for you. I'm going to leave the second two for you guys to do on your own, and then we'll work on the next page together. So let's just take a look at the ones that we did together. Already, let me rephrase that. The one that we already did for you. The hungry children ate Grandpa's homemade chili. Grandpa's is going to be my possessive noun in that sentence, and it's going to act as an adjective. So who's my sentence about? My sentence was about the children. So that was my subject. The children ate, which was my predicate verb. And they ate chili, which means it's my direct object. Then I can go back, and children were being described by the. Which children? The children. And we can tell that those children are hungry, describing both being adjectives. In the next part, our possessive noun is acting as a adjective. So whose chili is it? It's Grandpa's chili. And homemade is describing the chili. It's not store-bought chili, it's homemade chili. And then diagramming that, children ate chili. And then on this one, because I don't have any second possessive nouns, or I'm not describing any possessive nouns, we're just going to diagram this. Our second sentence, did Grandpa use Uncle Roy's army recipe again? This one's another interrogative sentence. My sentence this time is about Grandpa. He's my subject. Grandpa used predicate verb. Recipe is going to be my direct object. Now, here's where we get tripped up a little bit. If I have another verb in my sentence, when I have a predicate verb and an interrogative sentence, then my first verb, so did, is going to be a helping verb. Grandpa did use the recipe, if I was going to rephrase it, which you can see in my diagram. Okay. So I think with all the examples that we've given you, I think you guys can do the C and D on your own, which will be found in the PDF file under today's assignments. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, leave a comment under there, or message me or any of the other teachers, and we'll be able to help you out. So let's look at the second page. Let me move myself so we can actually see. All right, so if I take a look, number 2 says, imagine you are having chili for dinner. Write a sentence about it and include a possessive noun. So this is where you get to do a little creative writing using the possessive noun as an adjective, telling whose chili it would be. So personally for me, growing up, my mom would make me really good chili from scratch. So I'm gonna write my sentence about that. So I'm having chili today for dinner. So I'm gonna say, let me erase that part. Mom's chili is the best. So in my sentence, I have mom's as my possessive noun and chili. Oops, I realized I misspelled chili. Fixed it. Alright, mom's chili is the best. Okay, this next one, this is just working on days of the week. Something you guys have been working on since kindergarten and first grade and second grade. So I think you guys can do this, but just to start us out, today is Wednesday, so that means yesterday was Tuesday. If you're not sure, I see how to answer these. I suggest go find a calendar. If your grown-ups have a smartphone, they have a calendar app on there, and you can figure out what day of the week to fill in for each of those. So 3 days ago, the day was, count back 3 days. Tomorrow will be, if it's Wednesday, tomorrow will be Thursday. In 5 days, it will be, count up 5 days, and that'll be the day. On question number 4, on the lines provided, write the definition of possessive noun. So I'm going to give you 2 chances to get this. First way you can do this is if you go to under the resources tab in our Google Classroom, I uploaded the well-ordered language glossary, and it'll have all of our definitions in there, so you can find possessive noun. And then I'm also going to write it out in this video, so you'll have 2 places to be able to find it. So the definition of a possessive noun: a possessive noun is a noun that shows ownership. And behaves like an adjective. It modifies other nouns. And how we tell there's a possessive noun is that it uses an apostrophe and it may use the letter S. Okay, so that is all we have for today for well-ordered language. We're keeping with our normal schedule, so well-ordered language will be almost every other day, just like when we were in school. So I'll be with you guys in another 2 days with another well-ordered language lesson.